Set in the United States, the film introduces us to Ralphie, a young Uber driver who crosses the line by staring at a passenger breastfeeding her baby. The woman quickly notices and orders him to stop the car, then slaps him. Another monotonous, boring day at work passes. Ralphie exercises at a local gym where he obsessively takes photos of his physical progress. At night, he goes to pick up his pregnant girlfriend, Sal, who usually overwhelms him with complaints about their routine. Even when they're out shopping for their future baby, she keeps complaining about everything, though Ralphie always finds a way to cheer her up. After another day at the gym, Ralphie meets his friend Jason, his supplier of prescription pills. Apparently, Ralphie has had an episode of addiction in the past, though it's not specified exactly what he was addicted to. Jason tells him about some acquaintances who can help him with his problem. The protagonist decides to accept the invitation and meets a group of men led by the charismatic Papa, Dan. During dinner, Ralphie reveals that he was recently fired from a good job and has been trying to make a living by any means since then. Even so, he remains positive about his future baby and is open to all possibilities, something for which Dan proposes a toast. In that moment, Ralphie notices these men have a tattoo of a triangle with a line on top. At the end of the gathering, Ralphie is about to get into his car when Dan surprises him, pointing out that he realized from Ralphie's speech that no one has ever really supported him before. Dan confesses that he was once in that situation and wants Ralphie to know he's not alone. Upon hearing this, Ralphie remembers his childhood for a few seconds. The next day at the gym, Jason hands Ralphie a new pair of shoes from Dan's group, signaling that he made a good impression on them. In the following scene, Ralphie heads to Dan's house, where he meets the group members at a communal residence. Dan is nicknamed Papa, and the rest introduce themselves by their given names, but refer to one another as his children. Initially, they talk about tough experiences and illnesses they've managed to overcome. Gradually, though, the topic shifts toward their romantic partners, or more specifically, against them. One of the men confesses that his wife cheated on him with many men. Another man brands her as a prostitute, only using a harsher term. After the conversation, Ralphie explores the mansion until he finds Dan's office, where he sees a gun on the desk. Dan is not upset when he notices Ralphie there. Instead, he continues explaining the group's purpose. All these men live together in the house as one big family. The only difference from a real family is that they've chosen to be together. Recognizing that Ralphie is just another man who represses his problems, Dan offers him a place in their community. Returning to his job, the protagonist transports a boy who is on the phone with his mother and seems intimidated. As soon as the call ends, Ralphie suggests that the boy be stronger and create an inner shield to face his problems. Upon reaching his destination, the boy leaves the car, unaware that he left his phone behind. Instead of returning it, Ralphie decides to sell it at a pawn shop. When he confesses this to his girlfriend, Sal, she scolds him for committing a crime and exclaims that this isn't the kind of father she wants for her son. At the group's next meeting, Ralphie undergoes a sort of initiation ritual in which he's forced to confront all his bottled-up anger. At first, he's skeptical, but as Dan asks more personal questions, Ralphie reveals the heavy load he carries. He confesses that he doesn't feel respected by most people, which triggers a fit of rage as the men try to contain him in the circle. Later, one of the members asks when he's going to leave his girlfriend, apparently a common pattern after a newcomer's initiation. Influenced by these words and eager to earn Dan's trust, Ralphie skips picking up his girlfriend from work. At the gym, he's going through his usual routine until some men ask that the heavy metal music be changed to something lighter. Furious, Ralphie confronts them, demanding respect, and nearly starts a fight with Ahmed, a gym-goer who has been uncomfortable with Ralphie's behavior for days. Upon leaving the gym, Ralphie follows Ahmed's car and discovers the factory where he works. Ignoring more calls from Sal, Ralphie passes by a gay nightclub and looks angrily at the couples. Even so, he decides to accept two male lovers as passengers in his Uber. When they start getting too intimate in the car, Ralphie immediately stops the vehicle. Ignoring their complaints, he speeds off recklessly and eventually reaches their destination. Back home, Sal confronts him about being distant in recent days and threatens to give him the same cold treatment. On another day, Ralphie is walking through a mall with Dan's group when one of them, Brad, bumps into his wife, whom he recently left with no explanation. While Brad tries to calm her down, Dan walks away disappointed, wondering why they always have to shrink themselves smaller than they really are. Seeing Brad argue with his wife, Ralphie feels some remorse for how he's treated Sal. But Dan takes charge of the situation and pushes Ralphie to finally act like a man for the first time in his life. Following that advice, Ralphie corners a man bigger than him in a restroom and beats him up. As if that wasn't enough, he attacks a store's Santa Claus with a pipe, the same Santa who had been annoying him for days with silly antics. When he returns home, Sal notices he's upset and tries to comfort him with kisses. Not only does he push her away, but he also starts getting ready to go out, provoking her anger. Ralphie corners her against the wall, claiming that within him lies a cataclysmic power capable of creating and destroying. Words Dan used to describe him. As Sal seems not to understand, Ralphie locks her in a room and heads to Dan's mansion, this time with every intention of moving in. Thanks to that decision, he earns the title of son and the group's trademark branding, seared onto his skin with a hot iron. To endure the pain, Ralphie recites the community's pledge, in which they declare themselves the rightful owners of the world and vow not to let any woman take it away from them. After the celebration, Ralphie goes to Dan's office to take the gun, with Dan's permission. Pointing it at nothing in particular, he confesses that his father abandoned him one Christmas, leaving him to care for his mother on his own. Recognizing this deep pain, Dan encourages him to avenge that child he once was, to heal him so he never has to go through that again. Finally, Ralphie breaks down and starts crying. To comfort him, Dan suggests that he repeat over and over that there is no God, only Ralphie. The protagonist seems pleased by these words, but suddenly punches Dan and gathers his things to leave the mansion, ramming into several cars on his way out. Returning to his routine, the protagonist encounters Ahmed again at the gym and follows him to his workplace. There he sneaks into the factory until he reaches a secluded room. Ahmed surprises him from behind and begins to kiss him. Ralphie resists at first but ends up giving in to his true desires. After they have relations, Ahmed proposes a formal date to get to know each other. Ralphie's response is to shoot him mercilessly. The next day, Ralphie surprises Sal at the hospital, where she has given birth to their son JC. Ralphie returns to life with her, ready to become a family man determined to atone for his past mistakes. One day, however, when he comes home after his morning errands, he can't find Sal or their son anywhere. Only a note that reads, "Forgive me." Ralphie immediately goes out to look for her and meets a neighbor who is holding his baby. She hands the child over at Sal's request. Now a single father, life becomes a nightmare for Ralphie, who, in desperation, returns to Dan's group. The men welcome him happily, especially since they're celebrating Christmas. Ralphie even allows Dan to hold his child, telling them the mother is gone. Brad mentions that police officers have been prowling around the neighborhood, asking a lot of questions, which makes Ralphie anxious. Dan confirms that the cops went by the gym and asked about him. Ralphie, panicking, tries to open the front door, but it's locked. He points the gun at Dan, though Dan stays calm and insists they will help him. In response, the men begin reciting their usual pledge, while Ralphie aims the gun at himself. Suddenly, he shoots Dan in the head. A police officer bursts in just then, but Ralphie quickly guns him down. Having done that, he flees the mansion in another car, heading for the woods, where he has flashbacks of his childhood. Filthy and exhausted, Ralphie shows up at a nursing home, where he goes straight to the refrigerator, desperate for food. One of the cooks, Satchel, a very tall man, approaches and offers help if Ralphie will allow it. However, Ralphie points the gun at himself and pulls the trigger. Luckily or unluckily for him, the gun is out of bullets and he collapses in a faint. In the next scene, we see Ralphie as a patient in the nursing home, with Satchel as his caregiver. Satchel then tells a story from his childhood. His father took him fishing, but he fell into the sea. At that moment, he was certain he was going to die because he saw his father's boat drifting away. Yet it was only an illusion, as his father ultimately saved him. Satchel draws two conclusions from that experience. First, he has already met death. Second, he loves his father more than anything. Moved, Ralphie rests against him like a frightened child, while we hear the police arriving at the nursing home.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.